All right.
Okay. All right.
So here we are for hot takes about Asia. Usually these calls are about half an hour that we've had, and they're usually a bit of usually there's more than one person, but here there are more than one people because you guys are from Asia. And so you might have something to disagree with me about how digital identity is being deployed in Asia. And so this is going to be a little review of my trip. I mean, it's super subjective, right? I didn't go to some official um, event or anything like that. I met people who are either wanting to be DIF members or previous DIF members or people who just happened to contact me. And I went to the IETF, which is the Internet Engineering Task Force, which does deal with issues of identity on the internet. They mostly have identity, like identity is one of the missing pieces actually of the internet, but they mostly have some OAuth stuff working around um, in some of their working groups, but some of their working groups are also using uh, identity features like DIDs and VCs. So it's really interesting, and that stuff works really slowly through the IETF. And so one of the really interesting things that I found, and Kathy was just saying that before we started this, is that agentic AI is really hot. And that's actually, DIF has actually, we in our last steering committee meeting, has actually strategically said, look, agentic identity still falls under the mandate of identity. It's completely within our charter to be working on identity for objects. We used to have an IoT, an active IoT group, and agentic AI is, if that's what people want to be working on, it totally falls under diff. And that's been our hottest topic. So maybe I'll start with that and what I was finding out about agentic AI in my meetings in Asia. At the IETF, it was hosted by Huawei and China Telecom and China Mobile and a couple other large, the China Internet Association. I'm not sure exactly what the name of that was. So we had these hosts that were um, local. And there were a lot of attendees from the local university in Shenzhen. So there were a lot of young people who came to the hackathon. And there were a tremendous number of AI projects. And agentic AI and agentic AI identity, agentic AI discovery was really hot. So one of the hackathon projects did use DIDs and VCs for agentic. They saw DIDs as the way to identify your agents. So that was great. We also met some people who are researchers who have a DID association over in China, and they're interested in collaborating with DIF. And so DIDs are actually one of the technologies that is recognized as a technology for agentic AI. Um, there were more than 17, I think, AI side events. The way that the IETF works is very complicated. Most people aren't aware of this because who knows how the internet runs, right? But at IETF, they have organized meetings, which are their work groups. They have a bunch of other meetings that are like dispatches and birds of a feather. So basically, how it works is you can have a side meeting, anyone can have a side meeting, and that's not official. So these 17 side meetings, they weren't officially part of IETF. Those aren't officially for consideration, but it's a good way to have a meeting about a topic that you think should enter the IETF. And the next step after the side meetings is called birds of a feather. So birds of a feather or BOF, they have all these very cute names. There also was an agentic AI BOF, which was talking about what's the AI internet going to look like. After you go into BOF, you create work items that they have a different name for them or requests or something like that. And they can integrate those into working groups or create a working group from any of these items that are created. So none of the working items from the AI BOF actually moved out into any of the working groups officially at this point. It's just too early for the IETF to work on it. The IETF has a pretty hard policy that you need to have at least two real life deployments of something for them to consider it as something they want to undertake. Because their idea is we don't want to just publish standards that nobody uses, which is very different from diff. Diff doesn't really care. We're happy to publish standards that nobody uses. We're happy to be those early adopters and to have those early people. So it was really interesting to go to these side meetings, and they were also, the side meetings are in smaller rooms. They were completely stuffed. There was no room. There was standing room only. Some of them you couldn't even get in the room. Like AI was super hot and super interesting. Um, and especially among the young people and the hosts as well. And again, this is a thing where IETF is very conservative about it because they don't want people to just come to one IETF meeting. You have to come to, I think, four in order to actually run for any of the official positions there. So they're not looking for people to come to one IETF meeting and then, submit a proposal, even though you can, and I mean, that's part of the thing. You don't have to fly there to come. You can attend fully online. So any of the people who are really interested in moving this forward within the IETF can come to the next meeting, which is going to be in Vienna, but you can come to it online, no problem. So I found that interesting. And the other thing I saw about agentic AI is the different this in China. So I'm just talking about China right now. And I was just in Shenzhen. It wasn't like I did a tour of China, whatever. I was in Shenzhen at the at the Internet Engineering Task Force. So this doesn't necessarily apply to everybody. But it was quite interesting to see the different approaches to AI. And we saw that again at the ITU meeting. So there are about five different approaches to how to have identifiers for agents. And there are variations on all of them. So the variations that we saw, as I mentioned, there was one organization really pushing for DIDs for agents, which makes a lot of sense, particularly if it's like my agent talking to your agent across organizations. China Telecom had an approach where they had a proprietary system for identifying their agents because they had very specific agents that were actually working on the network optimization and network repair and those types of tasks. So each of their AI agents was very specific to a specific task, and all of their agents were owned by China Telecom. So they didn't have the
Mm.
issues of provenance and authority and who actually deployed this thing. They were all belonging to the same network and they all had the same purpose to keep the network running optimally. And so if anything went wrong, it was always the same person was responsible. It was always China Telecom. And so they used a proprietary system, which seems to be, that makes sense. Um, and that was how they did that with their internal thing. With China Mobile, they were creating a system to tie the agent to the SIM card because their idea is that each agent is deployed by an individual. So they were looking not at all about corporate type agents where you have agents within a corporation or represented by a corporation. The complete opposite end of the spectrum was these are individuals who are using Claude or whatever they use in China, DeepSeek or whatever it is they use to deploy their agents. And these are individuals deploying agents on behalf of the individual. So each agent should be tied to the SIM card of the individual. And so that was it was really interesting to see like these completely different even definitions of what is an agent in the first place, which is another reason why the IETF said, look, we can't yet adopt an approach to agentic AI because all you people in this meeting don't agree on what an agent even is. So how are we going to standardize something when there's no agreement? That may or may not be a good approach. I think one of the strengths and weaknesses of the IETF as a standards body is that it's slow to adopt things. And that's an advantage and a disadvantage. It's very good at saying no. And and rightly so. If anybody's ever been to one of these meetings, it's unbelievable. The number of working groups is astonishing. It's 5 days with, I think it's between 5 and 7 rooms open at all times. And each one of those rooms is a working group, pretty much. I mean, some of them are other things like plenaries and dispatches and slightly other things. But just imagine 5 days of, 6 sessions a day, of 5 to 6 rooms a day. That's how many working groups they have. So it's very important for them. I mean, thousands of protocols. They can't just adopt everything. So that was my takeaway from my China part of the visit. So I'm going to open it if you guys want to ask any questions, comments,
Yeah, I
anything
just
about how
want to
you're
actually
perceiving
add on to
AI.
that. It's quite surprising.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I don't know
Yes.
Yes.
if I'm audible enough. All right. Okay. So right now there is Money 2020 happening here in Bangkok at Queen's Circuit. It's like an event mostly about finance. It attracts a lot of people. It has like three events all year round in Asia, Europe, and I think in the US. So I happened to be a speaker on this one yesterday. No, what 21st, I think that was on Tuesday. And my topic happened to be the new ABCs in digital identity. So that is agent identity, business identity, and consumer identity. So it was really an interesting panel in a way that we all got okay. It started off in a way that, as you know, KYC is already like at least streamlined. That one is quite clear for people. But KYB has drawbacks in terms of scalability. The only thing that is close to scalability would be LEI, like backed by Glyph, right? That's the only probably reference that we have that can match at least the scalability of KYB. So from my panel, we concluded that, okay, so right now we have issues with KYB and now we are jumping onto agent identity. But the agent identity cannot work without the consumer identity because the consumer is sort of like the foundation. So it was really interesting in a way that when we say agent identity in the financial point of view, like what should an agent identity actually prove? Is it like the authority, behavior, and all those things? So then in the long run, are we going to create more problems for consumers? Because at the end of it, all consumers want like a streamlined process, right? They don't really want to do this, or always be monitoring the agent, or always have to be approving. Because we started off in a way that digital identity is no longer about onboarding or just logging in. It should be sort of like continuous, especially in the finance point of view. But then you're not going to be prompting the user to always, keep authenticating themselves along the way. And that's where the agents come in somehow. So at the end of it all, we're like, okay, what are the frameworks? What are the regulations? People had no answers. And then we're all like, okay, we might have to circle back next year maybe, but it's something interesting. And it so happened that after that, I joined the Japan FinTech Association. It was sort of like a conglomerate from Japan, backed by the embassy of Japan here in Bangkok. And it was amazing how many startups were developing products based on AI in terms of like credit scoring, approving this, so many things, insurance, pawn shops, all those things. You don't really have to have humans to kind of like estimate the value of their property. It's all going to be done by AI. But then my question would be, what are the frameworks behind it? So when I listen to Grace, I'm like, oh, okay. So the industry on the other part, people are still developing products. They're going ahead. But then when it comes to regulations, to the standards and all those things, where are we? So are we going to still have the same issue as SSI when it had just started or not? Like, what would be the next step, or how are we going to be helping to marry the two in a way that once you're building the product, at least you're confident that if you're going to pitch it to maybe a government entity in Thailand and they ask for like a regulation to back it up, you have a reference or something like that. Because on my end, I feel like, yeah, it's going to be solving problems. But then on the other hand, when it comes to adaptability and marketing and all, we are going to be answering the same questions we used to answer when we were being asked about SSI back then, 7 years ago. So I want to throw this back to you and see if you all feel the same or if you've experienced the same. But I really have to admit that it's the thing right now in Asia, but I don't know whether we are looking way ahead in terms of standards, frameworks, and all, or should we just continue developing products as we wait for like the standard bodies? That's my take on that.
I have a short opinion to throw in before we go further
Okay,
with this.
great. Oh, more opinions. That's our hot takes are getting
Yeah,
hotter.
sorry, this is just definitely an opinion, but I noticed that our organization has very different issues from, say, the Europeans or the Americans. Americans usually everything regarding DID is platform based, and in Europe you have a entire European organization that actually makes sure everything works together. No such thing exists in Asia. Everyone has its own take on what a decentralized identity is. If you take something that everybody's interested in, say an ID, a digital national ID for everyone, the very nature of this ID is different in every country. Singapore's very centralized ID is very different from, say, how Japan or the Philippines thinks an ID should be. And people react very differently as consumers to it as well. So I wonder if it might be better for us in Asia, at least, to concentrate on a part of the ID that is more easy to control in the short run, at least. I don't know if that makes sense. Let's say anything to do with something that's unpopular to the DID folks, banking, for example. Uh, Maybe having a thing that works might make it easier to standardize something, the other things that are more difficult. I don't know. That's just my take.
Okay. So now those are two totally different topics, each of which has five totally different directions I could go in.
Yeah, I'm sure you can, but this is
All
just in
right, so
reference to the
I'm
discussion
just gonna
earlier.
start, yeah, I'm gonna start with one thing, which is I'm gonna say I don't think that you're correct that Europe is one thing. I don't think Europe is any different um, than Asia in that area. I think the main way that it's different is the finance sector, which is what Kathy was talking about as well. But I think in some ways because Europe's smaller, right? Just population wise, they have more of a consortium of banks that want to impose and are capable of imposing their vision of identity on the whole of Europe because they've got all the money. They're the banks. And so I think that it looks a little more unified than it really is. Certainly, Switzerland is doing its own thing. Certainly, like in reality, all of the European countries already have their digital ID apps. So this UD wallet talked about more with Samsung when I was in Korea. Like actually, what's happened is the European Union is trying to impose a wallet when there already is a wallet. Everybody has a wallet. Every country has their own ID wallet. And the uptake varies between 30% and 60%, maybe a little higher in some countries. But everybody already has a digital wallet and they're all different. And I would say Europe is no different from Asia, except that there is this authority in Brussels trying to impose something from above, which may or may not work, right? So, and then I mean, the other thing I want to just say about standards is that very occasionally in the world of standards, you get something like Bluetooth or TCP/IP. It's very rare. Mostly what you get is what I would call flight aggregators and electricity transformers, right? When I went to Europe, I had to carry a little thing so that I could plug in my electronics. Standards are just extremely rare. It's extremely rare to have international standards that actually work for everybody. And so I think that we should be a little modest. And I don't think we even want that, like one big interoperable ID system. No, you just have transformers, right? We have, like, in case you haven't noticed, the three of us are speaking in English, and it's not the native language of two of the three of us. It works. It's a translation
Mm.
protocol. And now that we have, like in Zoom, you can turn on subtitles so that people can see things in their own language. I don't think we end up with one identity standards, and I just think it's not, even if it were desirable, it's unlikely that that will ever happen. Like that. So So back to what Kathy was saying, specifically, the first thing I wanted to address was the first thing that you were talking about, which was what do you do with business IDs? And Glyph is out there, and it turns out that LEIs aren't very much in use. They're required for some financial transactions and stuff, but basically LEIs aren't used very much. And one of the really interesting approaches I saw with the first person project, which is, I was talking a little bit about that when I was in Singapore with the people at Affinity who are working on this first person project, which is basically an identity project for the Linux Foundation's code maintainers. So fully, like, how do I know that this code maintainer really is the code maintainer they say they are? Really important, right? To maintain your code without bots and all those things. And so they're working on that project. And from FPP's perspective, the first person project, they said, look, we just assign a DID to a company. Why not? There's no reason that you need a special kind of identifier for a company. We just assign a DID. And so it's really just a question of where the registry sits. And again, they're working with IRA and there's all kinds of registry systems. Glyph is really just a registry. And I think that they may be correct that you don't necessarily need a special kind of identifier. You could use a DID or any other type of identifier for a company. It's just a question of where the registry sits and where the source of truth is. Glyph has done a really clever thing and said, okay, Glyph is going to be the registry for legal entities. And so then you need to be a legal entity in the jurisdiction where you are. Similarly, FIDO does a similar thing. It's like if you have a um, a legal entity in your country, then FIDO can recognize that and provide an identifier for it. So those are business identifiers. And like I said, they could be DIDs. There's no reason they couldn't be. The main question is what do you consider the source of truth as the registry for this really is a business? The disadvantage that Glyph has, and FIDO for that matter, is that if you're an entity that isn't exactly a legal entity, let's say it's the Ladies Gardening Club, you're still an entity and you don't necessarily want to have to incorporate. You're just the Ladies Gardening Club, but as an entity, you still want to work with other entities, maybe the Gentlemen's Woodworking Club or whatever it is. And they don't have any legal, they don't even need to, right? They don't handle any money. They don't need a legal entity, but they are entities of themselves. And so the FPP project does that through registries that allow you to just self-declare, we are an organization. And I think that that's a much more appropriate way to do that. Oh, Kathy, there's two Kathys all of a sudden. Um, the other thing I would say, Kathy, of course, is tell people to join DIF. We're doing a lot of work on these things, and our working groups are open to people who want to work on these identity projects. And then the final thing around agentic AI, Kathy keeps changing form. Oh, wow. Now she's a different. Oh, here she is.
Yeah, sorry. I was still at the
Oh, she's
event.
just transforming.
No, because I was still at the Money 2020 event, so I had to just try to rush to office. It's still going
Okay.
on, so that's why I couldn't put on the camera before. Yeah,
Okay,
No worries, no
great.
worries.
Good to see you. Um,
good to see
so
you.
yeah, and so the in terms of the agentic AI, that's been, that's an area where DIF is going to be focusing this year. And we have some working groups that are really moving on that area. So again, if they are interested in this topic, now is the time. And we are going to, Juan is now speaking to our new Korean participants, Indian participants who've joined. So they're going to start figuring out whether there should be a regular meeting at a time zone that works for everybody in that region. And so then the Trusted Agentic AI Working Group is probably going to have alternating meetings at different times for different time zones because it really is a big issue. And the specification that was recently donated by Vouched, which we're now calling Chaos, KYAOS. So know your agent operating system,
Region.
Chaos. It yeah, it's going to be the
The
we're
NKYA,
gonna
know
be
your
working.
agent.
Yeah, Know Your Agent, KYAOS, Chaos. It's a great name. We were like, we love the name. They had originally called it MCPI, but we were concerned about the trademark and, like let's just call it. And also it's not just for MCP, it's for other agentic protocols as well. We're like, let's try and find a name that is more widely applicable because it's not just MCP agents, it's any agents. So, so that's really exciting. And that specification, I think we're going to have a version like 1.0 out in the coming months. They haven't yet submitted it to the steering committee, but the working group is just making some tweaks before they create version 1.0 that will be approved by steering committee. So that's going to be really fast moving. Um, so that's with agentic. I think it's a really big question. And like you said, people are ignoring these standards. Oh, Kathy disappeared again. I won't want to say the
And
next part until she comes back. It's
yeah,
important. Yeah. Okay.
there she is.
Oh, there she is. Oh, there's the form of Kathy has returned.
Maybe it's the
Did you
agentic
guys
AI
experience
version of
that?
Kathy.
Oh, no, no, no,
Yeah,
I
we
don't know
did.
what happened
Yeah,
as
we
well.
experienced that.
Maybe because I a lot of AI,
What's up?
so
Too much AI.
like,
Yeah, that
but
was
I
the
cannot
other
see
thing I
you.
wanted to say about the AI. You don't see, we see you. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I can see
We
Um,
see
myself, but
you.
I cannot see
You're
you.
there. Yeah. We see you, Kathy.
Okay, now I
we
can see
see
you,
you.
Victor.
We see you just fine. Okay, great. So the other thing, there was a really interesting contingent from Brazil that had come to IETF, and one of the researchers there said that AI gives incorrect answers or does incorrect things 13% of the time. Like 13% is
Oh,
really high.
right.
And
Mm,
I recently noticed, like when I ask Google, what time is it
mhm.
in Mountain Time in the US, it consistently gives me the wrong answer. It's been really consistent over the last week of giving
What?
me an incorrect time. Yeah.
Oh
So
my God,
13%
okay.
is extremely high. And the
Mm,
liability issues, I think what's happening is those are getting pushed out. Like this isn't Diff's area of expertise, but we have people, right now we're talking about like delegated authority. We have a delegated authority task
yeah,
force as a sub task force, right? How can you delegate authority to something that 13% of the time does the wrong
sense.
thing? Like what authority are you going to give it? Okay, you could book something on my calendar, but you can't pay
Mm,
for an airplane ticket that's going to cost $1,000, right? Like
yeah,
if 10% of the time you're going to screw that up, that's a big budget for me.
right.
Um, s- and one of the things that has been very clearly avoided by the large AI companies is the issue of liability. Who has legal liability for it? And I think that if companies were told you have legal, or individuals were told you have legal liability for everything that your bot says, nobody would use the stuff because, you could say, well, my bot said it, I didn't say that. But if you actually had legal liability for everything that your agent that you deployed says, 13% error rate is not acceptable. And we've seen companies retract things and stuff like that. It's a scary world, and I don't think that we're going to see that level of liability because the companies who manufacture the AI are too powerful. Nobody wants to legislate against them. So we're going to see this really, and we're seeing that already, right? If you look at the wars that are happening in the world right now, a lot of the warfare is just media warfare. And AI warfare, did that really happen? Did that not happen? And you look at these pictures and you can just flood the zone with all kinds of misinformation, which is what the creator assertions working group is working on. But we're seeing a really strange world in which there's no liability for releasing disinformation into the world. And governments are using it and corporations are using it, and there's just no liability attached to any of that. It's very strange. Like it's very frightening. And I think that'll be the state for I don't know how long. I think the creator assertions working group will get to the point just like it used to be, there was so much spam in our inboxes, and then that problem was solved. I think we will solve that problem, but we're going to go through a couple of years of like total chaos. And like I said, media warfare, a lot
I'm
of
not
that.
sure
Yeah.
it's just going to be, I'm not sure it's just going to be years, given how long some of this has been around.
Well, it's
I
always
hope you're
around, but
right.
there's like the level of it, right? The amount of it. Like
I hope,
spam still
yeah,
gets through to you, right?
yes.
There's still, and still half of the traffic on the internet is spam.
And certain countries have it higher than others. Less in Singapore. In the Philippines, you got a lot more spam.
Yeah. So it's higher and lower, and I don't think that the AI slop will disappear, but I think
I
it'll get
agree.
easier to identify. Yeah, I don't think it'll ever go away. Well, that's not true. I think we're going to see energy crises, and I think we're going to see places where it's just not like that's not where you want to put your energy resources or your CPU resources.
Mm.
But, and that was another
You're right.
topic I kind of tried to bring up with people because as I was traveling, like this weird apocalyptic stuff started happening in the Middle East. And it really is a question like if half of the world's hydrogen processing plants are shut down, that means half the chipsets until those things are restored. Nobody's talking about that, but that's a reality. Energy, I don't know what energy shortages are like there, but a lot of countries have already asked people to work from home, et cetera. What does that mean for these big data centers is a real question. Are we going to run these data
Europe,
centers while people, yeah,
Europe is
yeah,
closer to where all the energy is more than Asia, unfortunately. So we get the really bad part of the crisis. At some point
yeah,
when it hit, it's really going to hit bad.
yeah. And it's gonna be, and that's another question for AI. Like in that case, what do you use AI for in a lower resource? And it's not going to be for advertising. There are
Mm.
things where AI is a critical thing, and there's other things where it's like, well, that's nice to have. Yeah. So we're going to see the cost of that shift. I'm just going to say shift. I think. So maybe it won't be with us forever just because of the cost of it will be, you can't get a $10 a month Claude subscription anymore because it's not
No,
$10.
that would be
Yeah.
absurd because right now some of us just rely on AI, like writing emails, this and this. I can't even imagine going back now because of stuff like data center costs and maintaining AI and all. And lots of businesses that are coming up now solely based on AI. There should be another way out, maybe solar powered or something, but they still also have to, there should be some alternative. We cannot go back. We cannot allow ourselves to go back. I don't want to
Yes,
go back.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Well, I disagree with that. I mean, we live on a planet and there's only so much stuff on the planet and we will have to be more conservative. But if you look at like one of the impressive things about Shenzhen was everything's electric, right?
Yeah.
All of the vehicles, everything is quiet.
Okay.
It's all quiet. But it's also
Mm.
impressive how much light, how much lighting, how much, like we just use so much lighting all the time for things that don't need, like there's a lot of ways that we can have just as good a lifestyle if we use these types of tools properly and we use our energy properly. Right now, there's just so much waste. Everything is on all the time. Every light in every window is like, you know, like lights on the outsides of buildings, all of these neon signs. I don't think we have to necessarily live a worse lifestyle with less energy. We just have to think about what do we really care about. Of course, I'm getting ready, as you can see with my little seedlings here. I'm getting ready for, you know,
I have a
spring to
proposal
plant
of a
some
solar
food.
powered. I wrote a proposal of a solar powered data center, so I'm also getting ready.
I mean, again, the solar panels don't really solve the problem. I've seen data centers powered by hydropower as well. The solar panels have to be produced and shipped across the world. And there isn't enough material to
Yeah.
create that much solar power.
Yeah, I agree. But just to like on a small scale, just to be having like a
Yeah.
backup, but obviously gonna just be powered by solar, but it's going to be like hybrids, solar as a backup somehow, or hydro as a backup, depending on the availability. But it's a big project in that there should be some agriculture as well. Like it's just it's just so like so many other things all together. So yeah, I'm trying to build that. But the main thing is the data center. So hopefully
Yeah.
it will
I
work
saw
out.
really interesting.
Yeah.
I see really interesting plans for like local data centers, right? Like for
Mm-hmm.
municipalities and for smaller regions to have more control of their own energy and how they use data centers rather than these enormous data centers. And I think that we're going to see that as well in the future, like a more local kind of economy around those things. And I
Yes.
think so. I think
Yeah.
that your directionality is probably correct.
Mm.
So that was my hot
I
take
don't know.
on,
Yeah.
sorry.
I don't know if that's ever going to happen here in Singapore, considering that the data centers are so integrated into how industry is here.
Well,
And they're
Singapore, I think, has
usually
thought
run
a
by
lot.
very big companies.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Singapore has thought a lot about the future and its own production of energy.
Yes, yeah. And one of the
Yeah.
scariest things that I know because I attended one of the briefings of the government for it, a private briefing, was how compartmentalized Singapore has turned every part of our industry. Eventually, everything is going to be very, very compartmentalized.
What do you mean by compartmentalized? I'm not sure I understood.
They are making everything redundant. There are 24. There are 24 administrative towns in Singapore. You can split up the island
Mm.
into 24 areas. And ideally, and this is really a bad example, but if one of them shuts down, the rest of Singapore should still operate because there are redundancies across the 24 ones.
That
So
sounds
even a
good.
big, yeah, even a big company, let's say DBS Bank, is not going to have a central headquarters. Everything is going to have as if 24 separate DBSs are running.
That sounds actually like a good plan. Of
Yeah,
course,
I
we're the
believe so
Decentralized
too.
Identity Foundation. I
Yeah,
don't know who's
well,
joined us. I suspect it's
no,
Juan, but I don't
Singapore
know who
has
joined us.
One.
Singapore has not joined
Oh,
us. Apaniti has
it's
uh what's that other company that also starts with uh, two of the companies in Singapore that deal with decentralized identity have joined DIF.
I think
oh,
Grace means
well, yeah, well,
we're joining right
Yeah,
now
Affinity
on
and
the call.
Avon. So, yeah, I assume that's Juan on the call.
Yeah.
Affinity and Avon are members of DIF, and Affinity is working on the FPP project, which I mentioned, and Avon is a hospitality company, which also has been showed a lot of interest in our agentic AI. I actually should check in with them. I haven't talked to them recently. Um, so yeah, so we do have members who are associate members and contributing members in Singapore. The last part of the thing I wanted to cover was also to talk a little bit about my visit to Korea. So we have new members from Korea, Rayon Secure. They actually said they were coming to this. I don't know if they didn't show up, but that's fine. They can watch the recording. And they're working both with the Korean government on DIDs and identity, and they are interested in the agentic area as well. And so they're going to be joining they actually have joined the Trust Agentic AI working group, and they're very interested in also moving DIDCOM forward. So we're going to be seeing a survey coming out soon that we're going to do in collaboration with them to find out who's using DIDCOM. So that was really interesting to see that in Korea, DIDs are really big. So that was one of the
Yeah.
organizations we met with. The other organization we met with also joined was called Lead Point, and they've been working with the Incheon, like there's sort of an island, the islands off of the coast of Korea, and they have kind of a citizen card, which is using DID, a citizen digital citizen card using DIDs. And it's really interesting. It has all of the things you expect in a digital ID, but they also, one of the implementations they used over there is they're doing an implementation where individuals can file their ideas. So it's kind of like a pre-patent ID thing. So if you have an innovative idea, so in order to try to help encourage people to innovate, they can submit this on their ID which is kind of weird thing to have in your ID app, but it's a really interesting way of trying to bring out more and more innovation among the actual individuals of that island city. I don't know exactly what the national status, they call it citizens of Nishan. And that was really an interesting implementation. They're doing it on Hyperledger with did Indy. So that was really interesting as well. And they've also joined and they're also interested in mostly in human AI, actually, that group, rather than Agentic. But it's interesting to see that DIDs really are very much implemented in the Korean system. So yeah, so that's sort of the exciting news. And like I said, we had a discussion with Samsung, but they were Samsung SDS, but they were mostly the finance department. I don't think they're on a trajectory to join DIF or anything, but it was a nice conversation, and they were interested in the European wallet and what's going on with the European ID wallet. And so I just made a presentation there. There wasn't much to say about it. They were lovely hosts, and yeah, so that's sort of what happened there.
Excuse me a second. I have to come out. I have to close the video. I have to say hello.
Okay. Cool. I don't know. That's my summary of my
Oh,
hot takes. Give a little bit of background of what I found when I went to visit Korea and China, mostly in the area of the AI. That seemed to be really hot topic. And I'd love to get input from anybody also what's going on with them, how they see this field. And I'll take questions. So it can be kind of an open discussion. So that's great. So I'm going to start with China because I went there before Korea, and I went to the Internet Engineering Task Force, and there was a lot of talk about agentic AI. That was the hot topic. There were 17 side meetings, not in the central, like it wasn't part of IETF. These were side meetings about AI and what's the AI internet going to look like. The IETF hasn't integrated any of them. There was a birds of a feather, what they call like there was a group discussing how to integrate AI into different IETF work groups, and that was inconclusive at this meeting. So AI hasn't been integrated into the Internet Engineering Task Force, but it's finding its ways through different ways. What was really interesting was looking at these different approaches. In one of the working groups, one of the guys was trying to introduce, it was an OAuth based thing where it views AI agents as workflows, which I think potentially can work internally, but across organizations probably doesn't work well to see it that way. And then the other thing that I saw was three organizations that are actually implementing AI, as well as there was some AI stuff in the hackathon. So in the weekend before the meeting, there was a hackathon, and a number of groups were using DIDs for agentic AI as their project for the hackathon that they were presenting. In the different companies that were presenting, what really stuck out to me, there were three organizations. One was a nonprofit doing, I think I've put that on the Slack channel, that wants to collaborate with DIF, and they're looking at DIDs and VCs for agentic AI, and they've developed a little protocol for that. And then what I saw with China Telecom and China Mobile were kind of opposite approaches. So China Telecom is using agents within their organization, within the operational network for optimization of the network, for repairing of the network, for those kinds of very operational tasks. And so all of the agents are owned by China Telecom. All of the agents have functions within that optimization network. And so the accountability and the responsibility and the delegation isn't an issue. So they're just using a proprietary system of their own for identifying those AI agents because they're all deployed by the same entity. And so that's a little bit closer to the workloads idea. They're not using workloads, but they are using just their own internal system for identifying agents. And that's sort of one extreme. Like, what is an agent? big question. And so on the one extreme, you've got all the agents all deployed by the same company, never functioning outside of the company, all within very specific tasks and specific capabilities. So that was one extreme. The other extreme was China Mobile. China Mobile was seeing agents as something that are deployed by individual users on their behalf. So my personal agent, whatever that might look like. And so from China Mobile's perspective, they were looking at a schema. They had a schema that was tying the user SIM card number to the agent because you're automatically, if it's coming from your phone, then presumably it's your agent. And so that was how they were dealing with delegation and authorization, that it would be tied to a SIM card. The person I talked to wasn't, I think, the most technical person there, so it was a little difficult for them to explain, like, oh, what are you going to do about porting phone numbers and different, using a different mobile service? I don't know how many different mobile services there are in China. I'm assuming more than one, but maybe I'm wrong. Um, but so the idea there was to tether it in some way to the SIM card. So that was a completely opposite end of the spectrum. Like that's how they were looking at it. And then yeah, and the two people I met in Korea I'm speaking to now. Actually, there was a third, but we didn't really talk about AI at all. Um, so yeah, I understand Rayon. It also has some specifications of how to implement this type of thing in the AI using DIDs and VCs. We haven't reviewed that yet, but I'm super interested to find out more about what you guys are doing. And yeah, so maybe we can just open it up a little bit to questions or how you guys are addressing the AI question or AI identity questions.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions I had about the approach is and taking an approach where they're looking at it as processes. The question of deterministic versus non-deterministic actions by the AI agents. Did that come up in the conversation? Because I mean, I like the simplicity of that approach to say these are proxies effectively, but I think the novel aspect of it is that it is a stochastic process. So I think that introduces other considerations that with a deterministic process you wouldn't necessarily have, and particularly thinking about failure states, error states, measurements of effectiveness, whether they be transparency or bias, etc. So so in hearing your comments, Grace, that was one of the thoughts it generated for me. I'm not sure if there was much discussion of that or if that remains something to be explored.
So yeah, I didn't hear a lot of discussion about that. I mean, the optimism is a little bit over the top. There was one researcher, there was one researcher from Brazil there was a whole delegation from Brazil who came. And she said, listen, we've done a lot of studies and we see these agents about they make errors or lie. We don't even know how to call what they're doing, right? Because we don't understand their intelligence. Like they have a totally different way of doing things. And they do that about 13% of the time. They do the wrong thing. We're just call it do the wrong thing. We don't know what is it a malfunction? Is it a deception? We don't even know what to call it. But 13% is a very high percentage of the time when you're talking about something, like you said, it's more deterministic, like it actually used money or it actually made an optimization decision. Like that's a big deal. But it wasn't brought up very much in any of the topics that I heard.
Well, and I think we've seen, right now it's quite a time of optimism, and I understand, that helps us do hard work, just looking at the potential. So I don't want to be overly critical of that, but it seems that is still something that we're in that early stage. Whereas we think about the suitability of these models, we have to consider it against multiple factors.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something that is going on in our working group. And also, just given the interest in this topic, I know that Juan is actively talking to some of you directly about creating at least one and probably multiple meetings at time zones that will be friendly to Southeast Asia, so that we'll be able to have more inclusive discussions. But there is a delegated authority working task force under the Trusted AI Agents Task Force within DIF. So that's definitely something that people can join if they're interested in that particular topic. Oh.
Thank you
Any other?
for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah. Yeah. Like this has been one of the things that one of the reasons I started my work, like my first 3 months at DIF in Southeast Asia, was the sense that that's really where a lot of this technology development is happening. But at DIF, we just because of our history and not, we just don't have enough of our meetings at time zones that would be friendly to that. And so we do need to make some adjustments on our calendar. And so we're actively looking at that. Anyone else on the AI point? Okay, Kathy has to get going. Yeah, she's also taking part in a conference that's happening in Bangkok right now. So thank you, Kathy. She was talking to us earlier about how that conference had a lot of work going on in terms of the AI and the finance areas, and people were discussing these three aspects: the know your customer, know your business, and know your agent, and how different approaches are evolving towards that. Um, and one of the things that I know Brian's been involved in is this FPP project where they've been looking at just using DIDs to identify a business, like not necessarily needing an LEI, a business identifier, but and the legal entity identifiers of Glyph have been one of the ways that we've identified businesses. But it's certainly possible to just use a DID for that. And so I know some of the people that have been working with Brian have been using DIDs to identify entities, not just individuals. And that makes a lot of sense if you're using the same type of identifier for agents, for individuals, and for businesses, that might make it a lot more readable and less complicated. And then that may be a good solution for people to be thinking about. Anyone else, questions or comments about that area? Okay. So a little bit more about my Korea visit. I visited the two organizations that are here, LeadPoint and Rayon Secure, as well as I had a quick visit as well to Samsung SDS. With Samsung SDS, it was mostly a presentation. Like they're not necessarily considering joining DIF. They have I think Samsung has different branches of their entity which join standards bodies, but that was not one of the ones that really joined standards bodies. And they were just interested in the European wallet and how to be compliant with that. Obviously, that would be something very is interesting for them. So for that, I was mostly just doing a presentation about what's going on in Europe, what's happening with the wallets in Europe, and what are the developments there. And at Lead Point, I saw an amazing demonstration of what they're doing in Incheon, which is a human identity system for the citizens of that island. It was particularly interesting to see some of the features that they had put in there. Some of them had to do with ecological, recycling and getting points for doing ecological activities. Another one that was particularly innovative, I've never seen it anywhere else, in their identity system was a pre-patent idea submission so that citizens could submit their ideas and be able to find out is there a patent for it and be able to also sort of pre-register it so that if it ever does become an invention that there's a record of their having submitted that idea and so that they would have that advantage pre-patent. So that's kind of a really interesting thing that they were doing there. And that implementation was a did Indy, I think with Hyperledger implementation. Maybe they can talk more about that. And so that was quite interesting to see how that was being implemented. And as the folks from Rayon Secure said, they've been working with the Korean government on DID and VC, and the main move that they're making is also towards AI and towards using DIDs and VCs for AI standards. So although we didn't do a deep dive into what you guys are working on, I don't know how much of it is public or you could talk about, but it was super interesting to see that just like what we're working on in the trusted agents working group, that you guys also have come to the conclusion that DIDs and VCs are the right direction for AI. So that's yeah, we'd all love to hear more about that if you guys can say anything. I don't know, like I don't want to expose anybody else's secrets, so I'm like kind of being quiet about it.
Yeah, hello, I am Taejin. Hello?
Hello. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
getting a
I
bit
am
of an
Taejin
echo.
Kim, CTO at Round Secure.
Yes.
Yeah, when Grace visited Korea previously, I mentioned that I would propose a national project regarding ID management for agentic AI, and we have successfully won the contract. So our proposal includes a contribution to de facto standard organizations such as DIF. So I would like to discuss many aspects together in the future. Thank you.
Yeah. That's great. And we're definitely looking forward to seeing some of that. And like I said, Juan will be making, I think he's making a specific meeting to discuss how to move forward with that. Yeah. Any other questions, comments that anybody would like to make? If not, we can close for now. And there is a longer session that we had before that with Victor and Catherine about it because of the time zone change. So there will be more material than what we just covered.
No, I appreciate those insights, and it's nice to get that additional insight on what's going on in the various parts of the world, because I think we're uh, our potential to collaborate, it's greater now than ever before. So I think keeping the communications going across these different regions of the world, I think would be for the betterment of our solutions. So I'm really appreciate you making that effort and the ongoing outreach that DIF is doing across the globe.
Yeah, thank you. And just kind of, I mentioned that we were at the IETF, which is a bit slow moving on these areas. And we do participate there, and I'll probably participate in their next meeting in Vienna. But in terms of international bodies, it seems that the ITU, with their study group 17, is being very forward thinking, and which is kind of weird to say about a standard like body like the ITU, and moving relatively fast, also a strange thing to say about the ITU. And so we've been participating recently. We participated, our next hot take will be about this. We participated in the ITU's meeting on AI and human identity. There's another one coming up at the beginning of June, and we've been invited to start participating and in that meeting in the study group as special technical experts with the trajectory of potentially joining the ITU and really bringing some of these things through these international organizations. And the ITU is based in Geneva, which is not as accessible to the Far East, but they have a tremendous number of national member states, including China, including Korea, including all of these organizations. And so we're hoping to move these standards into those bodies pretty quickly as the market is evolving. And obviously, those bodies take 2 years to 3 years to actually create a standard. So we'll have a proto standard coming out in the coming months. We expect them. I think most of you have seen that we just re-announced the donation from Vouched of the Chaos standard, which is KYAOS, Know Your Agent Operating System. So that's kind of a cute name. So we'll be announcing the version 1 of that. I think in the coming months, that working group is going to be submitting a version 1 to our steering committee. So yeah, so reach out either on the Slack or directly to us if you want to get more involved in that. And then we'll be looking at a trajectory of participating more specifically in the ITU regarding the agentic AI, because we think that body is going to be the one that's the most likely to come up with agentic AI standards quickly. They also have coming up, in addition to the study group, it looks like they'll be making a proposal for, I'm going to try to remember the name of it, but a focus group. It's called a focus group, which is open to anyone in the world to participate in the area of agentic AI. So that was a really interesting outcome that they had from the meeting at the end of March, was that they got the mandate to open up a focus group on agentic AI and agentic AI identity that would really include everybody from all over the world, or anybody who knows about it. Of course, it's only us geeks who know about it, but the ITU really is making progress in that area, and we plan to make sure that the work that we're doing, at least we're in the room from the early stages. That's one of the areas where I feel with some of the human wallet and governmental applications, we haven't been in the room, and as diff. And so some of our standards weren't as widely adopted as they could have been. And here we have every intention with the agentic AI to be in the room for those conversations. So again, anybody who's interested in that, once diff does join something like the ITU, that'll be open to you and your companies also to participate in, if as part of our delegation, if you're interested. So yeah. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, then we'll wrap it up. John, yes.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that extra clarification on the ITU activities, and thank you for going into overtime for me, Grace. I know you've got a lot going on, but that was a helpful summary, and I'll also check the notes, etc.
Yeah.
So much appreciated.
Well, our members are what make us an organization. So